Meanwhile, in Iran, the anti-hijab protests have continued over the death of the 22-year-old Mahsa Amini. An Iran-based NGO has reported that security forces, in their bid to try and put down the protests, have ended up killing at least about 50 people. Violence is spread to over 80 towns and cities in Iran, and in the latest, the protesters have clashed with the security forces in some parts of the country. They set large billboards on fire with the image of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And some women protesters also took off their hijabs or the headscarves and burnt them in bonfires. Now, on the other hand, thousands of people rallied in Iran's capital, Tehran, in support of the government. They waved the Iranian flags and also chanted that they completely support the government and also their supreme leader. They also demonstrated against the United States and the Israelis. Now, the government claims that the pro-government protests are actually very spontaneous and have not been sponsored by the government at all.
این سری هم مثل دفعات قبلی با شکوه‌تر حضور پیدا کردن و نشون میده که این مردم پشتیبان نظام و ولایت فقیهشون هستن و با این تعرضات کوچیک، با این شلوغکاری‌های کوچیک.
Now, the United Nations Secretary General also made an appeal to Iran's security forces. He's asked them to refrain from using unnecessary and disproportionate force against the anti-government protesters and also the people who are essentially asking for justice for Mahsa Amini, who was killed after she was detained by the morality police in Iran.
We call on security forces to refrain from using unnecessary and disproportionate force and appeal to all to exercise restraint to avoid further escalation. And I would add, we call on the authorities to respect the rights and freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association. And we also call on the authorities to respect women's rights and to take further steps to eliminate forms of discrimination against women and girls and implement effective measures to protect them from their human rights violations in accordance with international standards. And lastly, I would also reiterate the call from the High Commissioner for Human Rights on the need for impartial and effective investigation into the death of Mahsa Amini's death.
Now, amidst the protest, the Iranian government has imposed some pretty tough restrictions on the use of internet. Meanwhile, the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has said that these restrictions actually show that the Iranian government is afraid of its own people. Now, the United States has announced that it will help improve the internet access for people in Iran. Remember, there are restrictions in Iran to access social media sites such as Instagram and WhatsApp, amongst other social media sites that people have been using to communicate, to coordinate these protests. Now, the Americans say that they also want to ease certain export restrictions. And this will mean that the United States will allow technology companies to expand the range of internet services that will be offered for the people in Iran during the course of these protests. Now, this, of course, will allow the Iranian people to access essential software such as antivirus tools and also video conferencing services, besides a whole host of other tools that they can use to coordinate these protests. And this, of course, is going to be helped by the Americans. Now, the US Treasury has also said that the move will counter the Iranian government's attempts to try and censor its own people and impose internet restrictions. Now, in response to this announcement, Elon Musk has said that he would activate his satellite internet firm Starlink to provide internet services to the Iranian people. Now, Starlink provides internet services via a huge network of satellites. It is aimed at people who live in remote areas without access to high-speed internet. However, US officials say that the updated license does not cover hardware companies, but Starlink and others are welcome to apply for permission to the Treasury to do this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.